The twin suns of Erevan burned low across the alien horizon, turning the skies into rivers of red and gold in the great alien city. Thousands of tall, graceful beings gathered in the central square, their jeweled eyes glowing with curiosity. Among them stood Liara, the daughter of the alien high chief, her silver hair shining like threads of moonlight, her voice sharp and playful. She was proud, beautiful, and feared by many, known for her sharp tongue and bold challenges. That evening, she looked at the group of humans who had arrived from Earth. Visitors to this strange world, they had come to trade knowledge, to build peace, and to prove they were not weak among the stars. But to the aliens, humans were still small creatures, fragile, soft, and easy to mock. Liara, with a mischievous smile, decided to test them. She stepped forward, her long robes swaying like water, and her voice carried across the crowd. "If any human can find the rarest flower of Erevan," she said, her tone both mocking and daring, "I will give myself to him." The words made the crowd gasp and then laugh, for they all knew what that meant. The rarest flower was hidden deep within the shadowed forest, a place filled with monsters and deadly storms. No alien had dared to enter it for generations, and no traveler had ever returned alive. To them, this was no promise at all, but a cruel joke. Humans in the crowd looked at one another, unsure if they had heard correctly. Some laughed nervously. Others shook their heads, knowing this was madness. But one human did not laugh. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his dark eyes calm, his face quiet but strong. His name was Daniel, a simple soldier who had come not as a leader but as part of the Earth's delegation. Unlike the others, he did not see her words as a joke. The alien girl noticed his stare, and her lips curved into a smirk. "Will you try, human?" she asked, her voice dripping with amusement. Daniel's voice was steady. "Yes," he said, "I will." The crowd roared with laughter, their voices rising like thunder. Some shouted insults, others mocked him, but Daniel did not move. His calm silence only made the moment heavier. Even Liar's laughter faltered for a second. Though she quickly hid it, around them, whispers grew. "No human can survive this shadowed forest." One alien hissed, "He will be torn apart in the first night," said another. "Why does he not fear death?" Others asked. Even the alien elders frowned, for they could not tell if this human was brave or foolish. Liara tilted her head, her jeweled eyes watching him closely. Her heart gave a strange beat she could not explain. Why did this human not tremble like the others? Why did his voice sound so certain, as if he had already decided his fate? The High Chief raised his hand to silence the noise. "You understand, human," he said in a deep voice, "that this quest is death." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "I understand," he replied, "but a promise, even in jest, should be answered." The chief's eyes narrowed, but he said no more. The alien crowd buzzed again, some amused, some confused, many waiting to see him fail. That night, under the twin moons, Daniel prepared quietly. He took only a pack, a blade, a rope, and a small light. Other humans tried to stop him, begging him to think. "You don't need to do this." One said she was joking, another added, but Daniel shook his head. "Maybe she was joking," he said, "but I was not." His words carried a weight that silenced them. From a balcony above, Liara watched him walk out of the gates. Her lips still smiled, but her eyes were unsettled. No human had ever dared to take such a challenge. Part of her wanted him to fail, to prove her people right. But another part, a hidden and quiet part, whispered a different thought. What if he did not fail? The shadowed forest loomed in the distance, dark and alive with strange lights. Its trees twisted like claws, and strange cries echoed in the night. Even the bravest alien hunters refused to step inside as Daniel crossed the field toward it. The alien crowd whispered behind him. "He is already dead," they said. But his steps did not falter. Not even once. At the edge of the forest, he paused only for a moment. He looked back once at the city, its glowing towers watching him like silent judges. His gaze lifted to the balcony where Liara stood. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the distance. She expected him to look afraid, but instead, he gave the faintest smile. Then he turned and walked into the darkness of the shadowed forest. The city grew quiet, the laughter faded, and only one thought remained in every mind. Would this human ever return? The shadowed forest swallowed Daniel whole. Its towering black trees stretching like endless walls. The air grew heavy, thick with glowing spores that floated like tiny stars, and every step echoed with unseen life. For a human, it was like stepping into a nightmare, but Daniel's eyes stayed calm, scanning each shape, each shadow, each flicker of light. He gripped his blade, his breath steady, his mind repeating only one thing: the promise he made when he accepted Lyra's challenge. Behind him, the alien city faded into the distance, its bright towers glowing under the twin moons. The people believed they had seen the last of him, already whispering about how quickly he would be devoured. But Daniel's steps did not slow, his boots pressing into the soft alien soil as if he belonged there. For him, turning back was never an option. Hours passed, and the deeper he went, the darker the forest became. Strange creatures shifted in the shadows, their eyes glowing green, their bodies hidden. Every sound was a warning. Every crack of a branch felt like a threat. Yet Daniel kept walking, his senses sharp, his hand never far from the knife at his belt. At one point, he reached a narrow stream, its water glowing faintly blue. He knelt and touched it, surprised that it was cold, refreshing, almost drinkable. But as he drank, he noticed strange shapes moving beneath the surface. Long, eel-like forms with teeth that shimmered. Quickly, he stepped back, realizing even the water here wanted him dead. Quickly pleat a ridge of twisted roots, each step pulling him higher until he could see farther into the darkness. From there, he spotted ruins of old stone, broken pillars covered in vines that pulsed. With light, he paused, his fingers brushing across a carved surface. Seeing the alien symbols etched into the stone, the ruins told a story of warriors who once entered this forest, but never returned. Daniel understood he was not the first to try, but he was determined to be the first to succeed. Meanwhile, back in the city, Liara pretended to laugh with her companions. She sipped sweet nectar from a crystal cup and rolled her eyes at the human's foolishness. "He is already bones by now," one of her friends said, and they laughed loudly. But when she was alone, she walked to the balcony, staring at the distant forest. A strange unease pulled at her heart, a whisper she could not silence. Why did she care if the human lived or died? Her father, the High Chief, stood beside her silently, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "You spoke too freely, daughter," he said in a deep voice. "The human may not understand, it was only words." Liara lifted her chin, her pride refusing to bend. "No human can survive the shadowed forest," she said. "He will be forgotten by tomorrow." But the chief's eyes narrowed, studying her carefully. "And if he does not die, what then?" Liara said nothing, but her heart gave another strange, troubling beat. Back in the forest, Daniel set up a small camp in the hollow of an ancient tree. He lit a small fire, careful to keep it low, knowing the flames could draw predators. Strange cries echoed through the night, deep howls that rose and fell like voices calling. He sharpened his blade slowly, his mind calm, his body alert. Sleep came in short, broken moments. As he woke again and again at the sound of movement outside, near midnight, something huge passed by his camp. He held his breath, peering through a crack in the tree, a massive creature, taller than 3 Men, its skin armored with plates of stone, lumbered past, its eyes glowed red, its mouth dripping with glowing saliva. Daniel remained perfectly still. Knowing one wrong sound would mean death, the beast sniffed the air, growled, and then moved away, its heavy steps fading into the distance. Only then did Daniel release. His breath, sweat running down his face. When the suns rose again, he pushed onward. His body tired, but his will strong. He moved carefully, marking trees with small cuts so he would not lose his path. He found berries that gave him energy, though their taste was bitter. He caught small lizard-like creatures for food, cooking them quickly over his fire. Every survival trick he had learned on Earth became his lifeline here. The deeper he went, the more he realized the forest was alive in ways he could not fully understand. Trees shifted as if they were watching him. Roots moved when he was not looking. Once he heard whispers in the wind, voices in a language he did not know. The air grew colder, the shadows thicker, and his heart beat faster. But still, he pressed forward. At the end of the second night, Daniel found something that made his blood run cold. On the ground, half buried in vines, was an alien helmet, cracked and rusted. Beside it lay a broken spear. Its tip snapped off, and near that, bones long, twisted bones of a warrior who had come before. Daniel crouched silently, brushing dirt away, realizing this was proof of what everyone had said. No one had ever returned. He stood slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with quiet fire. He whispered to himself, "Then I will be the first." With that, he turned back toward the endless forest and kept walking, unseen in the distance. Two glowing eyes watched him from the trees, following every step. The third day in the shadowed forest began with silence. Not the peaceful silence of dawn, but a heavy, watchful silence. As if the forest itself held its breath, Daniel woke to the feeling of being observed, his instincts sharp from years of soldier training. He rose slowly, gripping his blade, his eyes scanning the thick shadows between the twisting trees. The ground was damp, covered in glowing moss that pulsed faintly. It was beautiful, but it felt alive, shifting whenever his boots pressed down. As he moved deeper, he heard a faint clicking sound, like the tapping of stone on stone. It echoed from tree to tree, growing closer. He crouched low, his hand brushing the dirt, ready to act. Suddenly, a shape darted across the path. Faster than the eye could follow, another clicked from above, and he glanced upward to see three insect-like creatures crawling along the branches. Their bodies were long and armored, their limbs sharp, their mandibles dripping with green venom. Daniel knew he could not outrun them, so he stood his ground. The creatures dropped down one by one, circling him in silence, their clicking growing louder. The first lunged, and Daniel rolled aside, his blade flashing. The creature shrieked as his steel cut across its limb, green liquid spraying onto the moss, burning holes where it touched. The second attacked from behind, but Daniel spun, using the fallen branch as a shield. Its fangs sank into the wood, and with a sharp kick, he drove it back. The third leaped high, aiming for his throat, but Daniel dropped flat, stabbing upward with all his strength. The blade pierced through its chest, and the beast twitched before collapsing into the dirt. The others hissed, circling again, but Daniel's eyes were cold and steady. He fought with a mix of skill and survival instinct, striking when they exposed themselves, defending when they rushed. At last, both creatures fell, their bodies twitching, their venom staining the ground. Daniel stood, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face, but he was alive. He wiped his blade clean, his mind whispering one thought: this forest will not break me. Hours later, he came upon a wide clearing, the trees arching overhead like a dark cathedral. In the center lay ruins of stone towers, broken and covered in crawling vines. Strange markings glowed faintly on the walls. symbols of an alien script he could not read. But the place carried a deep, ancient silence, as if it remembered every death within its shadows. Daniel stepped carefully, his boots crunching against shattered bones. Some were human, others alien. Twisted remains of those who had tried to cross this place. His chest tightened, but instead of fear, determination grew stronger. He whispered softly, "I will not join you here." As he pressed forward, he searched the ruins for shelter as the sky above grew darker. But the ground trembled suddenly, stones falling from the broken towers. From the shadows of the ruins came a roar. Deep and shaking the air, a massive beast crawled out. Its body like a mixture of wolf and lizard, covered in spines. Its eyes glowed with hunger, its breath steaming as it fixed on him. Daniel gripped his blade tighter, backing slowly toward the edge of the ruins. The beast lunged, and he barely rolled aside, the ground cracking under its claws. He slashed as it passed, cutting into its leg. But the strike only angered it. The monster roared again, snapping its fangs, its tail whipping through the air with deadly force. Daniel ducked, the tail slamming into a pillar, breaking it apart. He knew he could not fight head-on. He had to be smarter, faster. He spotted a broken spear among the bones, its tip jagged but still sharp. Grabbing it quickly, he waited as the beast charged again. At the last moment, he planted the spear against the ground and angled it upward. The creature's weight carried it forward, impaling itself on the spear with a shriek. Daniel didn't wait. He ran to the side, pulling his blade and slashing deep into its exposed neck. The beast staggered, roared once more, then collapsed with a crash that shook the ruins. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping, his body trembling from exhaustion. But as he looked at the fallen beast, a grim smile crossed his lips. He had survived again, against odds no one believed he could face. He whispered softly, "You will not stop me," before pushing himself back to his feet. That night, he made camp inside the ruins, lighting a small fire with broken wood as flames flickered. The walls around him seemed to glow with the old alien carvings. He traced the symbols with his fingers, wondering what stories they told. Perhaps they were warnings. Perhaps they were tales of warriors long gone, but to him, they were a reminder. This was the path of the rarest flower, and he would walk it until the end. Far away, in the alien city, Liara lay awake in her chamber, unable to sleep. Her friends laughed earlier, telling her the human was surely dead. But the thought did not ease her heart. She walked to the balcony again, her eyes fixed on the distant forest, glowing faintly under the twin moons. A whisper returned to her mind. Seer's warning, your fate is tied to the human's courage. For the first time, she shivered, not from cold, but from fear of what might come. And deep within the forest, unseen in the dark, other eyes watched Daniel still. The trees shifted, the whispers returned, and the path to the rarest flower grew only darker. Liara sat in the great hall of her father's palace, surrounded by the warm glow of crystal lamps. Music played softly, alien instruments echoing like silver bells, and noble guests filled the room with laughter. Her friends sat close by, whispering and giggling, mocking the human who had dared to enter the shadowed forest. He must already be bones. One of them said, her jeweled eyes flashing, "Humans are weak. They cannot fight the darkness." Another added, "He believed your words, Liara. What a fool." And the circle of girls burst into laughter. Liara forced a smile, raising her golden cup as if she agreed. But her heart was restless, twisting inside her chest in ways she could not explain. She had made the challenge as a joke, a way to mock the humans, to remind them of their place. Yet every time she thought of Daniel's eyes, calm, steady, and fearless, her smile faded. Why could she not forget that moment when he accepted Why did his voice echo in her mind, stronger than the music in the hall? Her father, the High Chief, watched her from his throne, his sharp gaze piercing through her mask of confidence. After the feast ended, he called her aside. His voice deep and heavy. "You are troubled, daughter," he said. "Do not think." "I do not see it." Liara lifted her chin proudly. "I am not troubled," she replied. "The human is gone, and my people laugh at his foolishness." But the chief frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Do you truly believe that?" Lyra's lips parted, but she could not answer, so she turned away. Her heart pounding, that night she walked the palace gardens alone. The twin moons casting silver light across the flowers. Each blossom shimmered with faint energy, but none compared to the one she had named the rarest flower hidden deep in the cursed forest. She had chosen it because it was impossible. A cruel joke no human could ever answer. And yet now, alone beneath the stars, she whispered to herself, "What? If he finds it?" The thought made her tremble. Not from fear of losing face, but from something else, something deeper. Something she dared not name. The following morning, Liara visited the Temple of the Seer. The ancient alien woman sat surrounded by burning incense, her eyes clouded with visions. Before Liara spoke a word, the seer raised her head and whispered, "Your fate is tied to the human's courage." Liara froze, her skin tingling. "You spoke those words before," she said. "But he is only a man. Why should my fate be bound to him?" The seer's voice was soft, yet sharp as a blade. "Because he walks where no alien dares. And he does not walk for power, nor for pride, but for something greater." Lyra's hands trembled, and she shook her head. "He cannot succeed." She whispered, "No one can." The seer only closed her eyes, repeating the same words. "Your fate is tied to his courage." Liara left the temple quickly, her heart pounding louder than her footsteps. For the first time, doubt spread through her like fire. She looked toward the distant horizon where the shadowed forest lay. Its dark outline, like a scar across the land, was Daniel still alive? And there was he fighting, bleeding, surviving where others had failed. Back in the forest, Daniel was indeed alive, though every day pushed him closer to death. He climbed cliffs of jagged stone, his hands torn and bleeding. He crossed swamps filled with venomous plants that tried to wrap around his legs. He fought through storms that struck lightning against the trees, forcing him to find shelter in caves. Every trial pressed against his strength. Yet he endured, fueled by something beyond himself. At night, as Daniel rested beneath strange, glowing vines, he thought of Lyra's mocking smile. He thought of the laughter of her people, certain he would fail, and instead of breaking him, those memories gave him fire. He whispered to himself, "I will not die here." And the forest answered, with silence, as if listening. In the city, Liara tried to return to her normal life. She trained with her guards, sparred with her blades, walked among her people with proud steps. But every moment, her mind betrayed her, returning again and again to the human in the forest. When she closed her eyes at night, she saw him standing before the crowd, calm while others mocked. When she dreamed, she saw him walking deeper into shadows, and she woke with her heart racing. Her friends noticed her distraction. "You look worried," one teased. "Are you hoping the human will come back for you?" Liara snapped sharply. "No human will ever return alive from that place." Her tone silenced them, but the heat in her cheeks betrayed her. She turned away, her chest tight, her pride fighting a battle she could not win. Days passed, and still no news of Daniel's death reached the city. The people began to whisper, some mocking, others curious. How long can a human last? They asked. Even the elders began to grow uneasy, wondering if the impossible might not be so impossible after all. Liara stood once more on her balcony, her jeweled eyes fixed on the forest's edge. The wind carried strange feelings to her heart. Half hope, half dread, she whispered into the night, "If you are alive, human, why do I care?" But no answer came, only the haunting silence of the shadowed forest, where Daniel walked closer to the rarest flower with each passing day. Asterisk on the 6th day. The forest thinned, and the ground rose like a great stairway. Daniel climbed carefully, his hands raw and his breath slow. The air changed, cooler and cleaner, carrying the faint sound of falling water. He pushed through a curtain of hanging vines, and his eyes widened at the sight beyond. A hidden valley opened before him. A bowl of smooth black rock and silver mist. Waterfalls poured from high cliffs, glowing with soft blue light like liquid starlight. The spray filled the air with tiny sparks that drifted like fireflies. In the center of the valley stood a single plant on a dark island of stone. Its stem was thin and glassy, its petals shaped like folded wings. The flower pulsed gently with color, shifting from pale blue to bright gold. Daniel knew at once that this was the rarest flower, the heart of his impossible quest. But the valley was not silent. A deep rumble rolled across the rocks, steady as a drumbeat. Daniel crouched behind a broken stone, peering into the mist from the shadow of a low arch. Something vast moved. It crawled into view with slow, heavy steps, and the stone seemed to bend under its weight. The guardian was a monster with armor-like plates of midnight metal. Its shoulders rose higher than a man. Its jaws were thick with long, serrated teeth. Its eyes burned dull red, not with rage, but with a patient hunger along its back. Vents opened and closed like gills, releasing thin lines of steam. It circled the island of stone. Never leaving the flower's side, the message was simple, and it was final. No one would take the flower while it lived. Daniel let his breath out slowly, his mind running through options. He could not defeat such a beast with speed or strength alone. He needed a plan. He needed the land itself to fight for him. He studied the valley, the wet stone, the glowing water, the pockets of mist that hid small vents in the ground where steam rose. The rock around it was stained white. Brittle to the touch, heat and pressure lived beneath the surface, waiting for a careless step, waiting for a trap. He crawled along the edge of the bowl, keeping low, keeping quiet. He counted the steps of the beast, learning its rhythm. When it turned, he moved. When it paused, he froze. He found a cluster of dry vines clinging to a warm crack in the wall. He tore them free and wrapped them into a thick coil. From his pack, he pulled the rope, the flint, the small tin of oil he had saved. He did not know if this would work, but he knew it had to. He slid a length of rope into the crack. Feeling hot air pulse against his skin, he fed the vines into the same gap and soaked them with oil. Then he moved to the far side and did it again, building 2 long fuses across the valley floor. His plan was to wake the earth beneath the guardian's feet, to turn the ground into a weapon. But he needed the beast to stand in the right place. And he needed a signal it would not ignore. From his belt, he pulled a shard of the broken spear he had kept. He rubbed it in the glowing moss until it shone a small, moving light in his hand. Then he stepped out from cover, and the guardian saw him at once. Its eyes narrowed, and the low rumble grew into a warning growl. Daniel lifted the bright shard and waved it slowly. "Come on," he whispered. "Follow me." The beast charged, fast for its size, its claws scraping sparks from the rock. Daniel ran along the rim of the bowl, keeping the light high. He reached the first fuse and knelt, striking the flint. A hungry flame caught the oil-soaked vines and began to crawl into the crack. Steam hissed from the stone, and the guardian hesitated, confused by the shifting sound. Daniel sprinted to the second fuse and lit it too. The flames raced into the earth, and the ground under the beast began to tremble. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the valley roared, a geyser. of steam and shattered stone erupted beneath the monster. Lifting it into the air, its armor cracked, hissing vents blasted open, and it crashed down onto weakened rock. Daniel threw himself flat as another vent burst. Spraying scorching vapor over the creature's back, the guardian thrashed its tail, smashing the ground, breaking more thin plates of stone. Each break woke another hidden pocket of pressure. The valley became a storm of heat and sound. Daniel rose, coughing, his skin burning where steam had kissed it. He ran toward the island, his eyes on the flower behind him. The guardian roared and dragged itself forward. Broken but not beaten, it leaped, and the stone under it shattered again, dropping one leg into a narrow crack. Daniel seized the rope still tied around his shoulder and looped it over a jag of rock. He ran the other end around a tilted pillar and pulled with everything he had. The rope went tight across the beast's front leg. The pillar groaned, then fell, driving the rope deeper into the crack and pinning the limb in place. The guardian howled and clawed at the snare, but the crack was too narrow, the rope too deep. It tried to lunge again and only trapped itself farther, armor scraping, vents screaming. Daniel did not wait for a second chance. He crossed the last stretch of slick stone, dropped to one knee, and reached for the flower. Up close, the petals shifted like breath, warm with a living glow. He cradled the stem gently and cut it clean with his blade. The light flowed in too, his hands soft and strange, like holding a heartbeat behind him. The guardian gathered its strength for one final attack. It tore free a shower of rock and dragged itself forward with a sound like grinding iron. Daniel turned, the flower pressed against his chest. The beast lunged, and he threw himself sideways. Rolling over wet stone, the monster slammed into the island and slipped, its broken leg falling into the same deadly crack. The ground split wider, the vents screamed open, and steam roared up like the breath of a furnace. The guardian vanished into boiling mist. Its roar cut off in an instant. Silence fell, heavy as a blanket. Daniel lay on the rock, shaking, his arms wrapped around the glowing flower. Pain throbbed through his side and his vision blurred with heat and exhaustion. He looked at the cliffs, at the sky, at the shimmering falls that painted the air with light. He had done the unthinkable. He had taken the rarest flower from the heart of the forest. But his body was near its limit, his breaths short and ragged. He pressed the flower to his chest and whispered, "Just a little farther." Then darkness crept in at the edges of his sight. Soft and deep, Daniel slumped against the warm stone, the living glow of the flower shining over his tired face. The valley held him like a quiet cradle, and the water sang a low, endless song. And far away, beyond the trees and the mist, an alien city would soon learn that a human had changed the story of their world. The city of Erevan prepared for mourning. A week had passed since the human Daniel walked into the shadowed forest. The aliens gathered in the central square, dressed in dark robes, their jeweled eyes glowing faintly in the morning light. They lit lanterns of silver fire, not to honor his courage, but to mark his death. No human had ever lasted this long, and no alien believed he could still be alive. Lyara sat on a raised balcony, her face calm, but her heart restless. She told herself it was only form, only duty. But her hands clenched tight against the rail. Her friends whispered near her, smirking. It is time to laugh at the human's foolishness. But her lips refused to move. Her eyes remained fixed on the distant road. A small, secret part of her refused to believe he was gone. The high chief stood tall before the crowd, his voice carrying deep across the square. "We honor the human who dared to enter the forest," he said. "Let his bones rest where they fell, and let his name be forgotten in time." The people bowed their heads, some in respect, most in mockery. They spoke softly. He was bold, but foolish. Bravery cannot defeat the forest. This is the end, and in that moment, the gates of the city groaned open. Gasps rippled through the crowd as a lone figure stepped into the square. His clothes were torn, his body bruised, his steps heavy. But in his hands, he carried a glowing flower, its light shining brighter than the silver lanterns. It pulsed with living warmth, petals shifting like wings. The crowd fell silent, as if the world itself had forgotten how to breathe. Daniel walked slowly, each step deliberate, his strength fading but his will unbroken. Every alien eye locked on him, wide with disbelief. Some whispered, "Impossible." Others whispered, "A trick," but no one could deny what they saw. Rarest flower, the heart of their legends, glowing in human hands. Lyra's chest tightened. Her breath caught. She rose to her feet, her fingers trembling on the balcony rail. The mocking laughter of her friends died instantly, their jeweled faces pale with shock. Even her father, the great chief, took one step back, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. No warrior, no hunter, no alien elder had ever done this, yet here stood a human. Carrying the impossible, Daniel reached the steps of the high platform and stopped. He lifted the flower high for all to see, its golden light spilling across the crowd. Then he knelt, not before Liara's father, not before the people, but before Liara herself. His voice, though weak, carried clear, "I did not take this flower to win you," he said. "I did it to show what a human can do." The word struck deeper than the flower's glow. The crowd stirred, whispers like a rising storm. They had expected a plea, a claim of victory, but instead they heard humility and strength. Liara stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She remembered the mocking tone she had used when she set the challenge. Now the weight of her words pressed down like iron chains. Her father's voice broke the silence, sharp as thunder. "Human," he said, "you have done what none of us believed, but do you expect my daughter as reward?" Daniel shook his head, his dark eyes steady. "No," he said, "I expect nothing. Your promise was a jest. But I do not live or die for jests." He bowed his head, holding out the flower. "Take it. For it belongs to your world, not mine." The high chief stared down at him, his stern face unreadable. But the people began to murmur again, voices rising with wonder, not scorn. He gave it freely. One said, "He did not claim her. He did not claim glory." Another added, some whispered, "Perhaps humans are not weak. Perhaps they are." Something else, the weight of their doubt, their old arrogance, began to crack like old stone. Liara stepped forward, her robes brushing the stone. Her friends tried to stop her, their whispers desperate. "Do not go to him. You will shame yourself," but she ignored them, her heart burning with something she could not silence. She descended the steps slowly, her jeweled eyes never leaving the kneeling human. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Daniel looked up at her, sweat dripping down his face, his body trembling from exhaustion. Yet in his eyes there was no fear, no pleading, only calm resolve. Liara stopped before him, the rarest flower glowing between them. Her hands hovered, then gently closed over his. Her voice soft but steady. "You did the unthinkable," she said, "and you ask for nothing, but I cannot let this be nothing." The people gasped, their disbelief growing into something greater. Liara turned, lifting the flower in her hand for all to see. "This human has done what none of us dared. And he did not do it for reward," she declared. "He has proven that humanity is not weak, not foolish, but strong." Her voice carried like fire, her words striking every heart in the square. The silence broke into a roar of voices, some cheering, some crying out in anger, but all of them knew the truth. The story of their world had changed. The high chief remained still, his eyes on his daughter, his face unreadable. But in his silence there was no denial, only thought, heavy and deep. Liara lowered her gaze to Daniel again, her heart unsteady. She whispered so only he could hear. Perhaps the rarest flower was not in the forest at all. Her words trembled. Yet they carried the weight of truth, and in that moment, the alien city understood that a human had done more than survive. He had broken the wall between two worlds with nothing but courage. Asterisk, the square of Erevan trembled with noise. Aliens shouted, argued, and gasped, their jeweled eyes glowing in the firelight. Some cheered Daniel's return, calling him brave, calling him a warrior greater than their own. Others spat in anger. Refusing to believe a human could stand above them, the High Chief raised his hand. And silence fell heavy once more. Daniel knelt still, the rarest flower glowing softly in his hands, his body weak, his wounds deep, but his eyes steady. He did not ask for reward. He did not ask for love. He only offered proof of what he had done. The chief studied him for a long moment, his face a mask of stone. Then he turned to his daughter, his voice deep. Liara, you made the promise. Foolish though it was. What will you do now? The crowd shifted. Thousands of voices hushed. Every eye turned to Liara, waiting for her words. Her chest tightened, her mind racing. Her pride battled with her heart. She could deny him, laugh at him, call it only luck, and the people would follow her words. But when she looked at him, this human who had walked into death and returned, her lips refused to form the lie. Her friends whispered from the balcony, their voices sharp, say it was nothing. Say he tricked us. But Liara shook her head slowly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. She stepped forward, her heart pounding with every step. Daniel looked up at her, calm even in exhaustion. And for the first time, she saw no weakness in him. She saw strength, not of body alone, but of spirit. Something her people had forgotten. She stopped before him, the rarest flower glowing between them. Her voice was soft but carried through the square. My words were a jest, but he treated them as a vow. She said, he faced the forest, the beasts, the darkness, and he returned. The crowd stirred, their jeweled eyes reflecting the golden petals. He could have claimed me in pride. He could have demanded reward. But he gave the flower freely. Liara continued. And so I will not laugh. I will not deny him. Gasps rang out. Voices clashed, some shouting in shock, some in approval. The High Chief frowned, his voice sharp. Daughter, do you understand what you say? You would stand with a human. Liara lifted her chin, her eyes steady. Yes, she said, because he has shown me more honor than many of our own. Her words cut through the air like a blade, silencing even the loudest voices. Daniel bowed his head slightly, his voice quiet but firm. I never asked for this, he said. I did not fight to win her hand. I fought to show what a human can be. Lyra's eyes softened, but she shook her head. And yet, you won more than that, she whispered. You won respect. You won hearts, even mine. The crowd erupted again. But this time their voices were not only anger. Some shouted for tradition, demanding the promise be honored. Others shouted for pride, saying they could not allow a human to stand equal. But many, many voices cried out in awe, crying, he has done the unthinkable. Let him be recognized. The chief's face remained unreadable, his silence heavier than the voices of thousands. Finally, he raised his hand once more, and the crowd fell still. He looked at his daughter, then at Daniel, and at last he spoke. Perhaps the time has come for us to see humans not as weak, but as equals, he said. This human has done what none of us dared, and for that, he will not be forgotten. The crowd bowed their heads, some unwillingly, others in respect. Daniel struggled to his feet, the flower still glowing in his hand. Liara reached forward and steadied him, her touch soft but sure. For the first time, she did not see him as a toy, a fool, or a stranger. She saw him as someone who had changed her world. Later that night, when the square had emptied and only the moons remained, Liara stood beside Daniel in the palace gardens. The rarest flower rested between them. Glowing softly in the cool night air, she turned to him, her eyes bright with something new, something unspoken. "You gave everything, even when you had no reason," she whispered. "Why?" Daniel looked at her, his voice steady, because sometimes the unthinkable must be done. Not for promises, not for rewards, but because it is right. Lyra's breath caught, her heart trembling at his words. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his, her voice barely a whisper. "Then perhaps the rarest flower was never in the forest, but here, standing before me." Daniel smiled faintly, tired but true, and under the twin moons of Erevan, alien and human stood together, not as rivals, not as enemies, but as something new. The forest still whispered. In the distance, the city still murmured with doubt. But in that moment, a promise once made in jest had become a bond of fate. And the story of a human who did the unthinkable became a legend that no alien would ever forget.